I can assure you, I am as silent as the grave.
Okay, the next character in the series, Fanny Dashwood. In a novel where emotions are often suppressed beneath layers of civility, Fanny Dashwood stands as one of Austen's most fascinating portraits of quiet power. She doesn't raise her voice, and she doesn't seem to make sense, not until we see her character in full at least. She rarely even says cruelty outright, and yet she reshapes the lives of everyone around her with little more than a raised eyebrow and a well-placed sentence. Now, Fanny is not a woman of passion. She's a woman of position, of calculation, of propriety, and of boundaries carefully drawn. And these boundaries are often always tilted in her favour.
I shan't speak to them when they come in.
If Mrs. Jennings was all warmth and noise, generous to a fault, then Fanny Dashwood is her perfect foil, cold, controlled, and quietly devastating. And unlike Lucy Steele, who schemes for upward mobility, Fanny holds the high ground. She's born to the power, and she wields it with elegant precision. So in this episode, I'm not looking for a redemption arc. Fanny doesn't soften, and nor does she grow. But what she does do, from the moment she enters Norland to the final social shuffling in London, is demonstrate just how much influence can be exerted through restraint. Through each scene, I'll explore how Fanny operates, not through affection, but through inheritance, not through love, but through logic, and not through generosity, but through the illusion of rightness. Because in Austen's world, not all villains shout, some of them smile, which in itself can be all the more disarming. There's a kind of chill that doesn't come from the weather or from the wind. It comes from a silence that enters a room and shifts the temperature. Fanny Dashwood brings that kind of cold with her. Her arrival at Norland is never described in dramatic terms. She doesn't storm in, she doesn't scowl, but she doesn't need to. Austen makes it clear from the moment Fanny joins the household after Mr. Dashwood's death that something subtle but powerful has shifted. The air has changed. Mrs. John Dashwood now installed herself as mistress of Norland, and her mother and sister-in-law were degraded to the condition of visitors. That word, degraded, is deliberate. Eleanor, Marianne, and their mother don't just lose status, they're made to feel like trespassers in their own home.
We shall all be on our best behaviour, because we are the visitors now.
And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because Fanny lets it happen, or rather ensures that it does. Fanny doesn't insult. She doesn't rage. She maintains the veneer of perfect civility. She's an Austen archetype, the respectably cruel. The atmosphere at Norland changes the moment Fanny arrives, not through open hostility, but through subtle control. It's not John who does mean well, but Fanny who delivers every smile with a razor edge, making the Dashwood women feel like guests in their own home. She claims rooms slowly. She draws boundaries without confrontation. She uses tone, looks, and implications to communicate that the Dashwood women are now living on borrowed time, not just financially, but emotionally. What makes this so potent is that John Dashwood, Fanny's husband, Eleanor's half-brother, is not a villain. He means well. He wants to do right.
Perhaps the matter does require further thought, but I'm determined to help them, Fanny.
Fanny is the weather system in the room. All shifts and pressure and atmosphere.
Becoming cyclonic seeks to gale for a time. Rain or winter showers, good, occasionally poor.
And John, ever the passive observer, simply reads the forecast and adjusts accordingly. He doesn't resist the storm, he dresses for it. Fanny makes no effort to help the Dashwoods find their footing. She doesn't offer space or funds or emotional support. With no clear plan and no support from John or Fanny, the Dashwood women seem on the brink of being cast adrift, left to face the uncertainty of finding a new home without money, connection, or assurance. And then, unexpectedly, comes an offer. Barton Cottage, extended by Sir John Middleton, who is a cousin of Mrs. Dashwood. And while he is family, he's actually under no obligation to help. His kindness stands in sharp contrast to the inaction of those with far greater means and far stronger ties.
So, Cousin Mary, pleasure to meet you at last. Welcome to Devonshire.
I cannot thank you enough for your kindness, Sir John.
No, none of that. I'm delighted to have you here. I like nothing so much as company.
The fact that he, not John or Fanny, steps in to secure the future speaks volumes. I'll make some reflections on John Middleton when I get to his character analysis. Now, Fanny believes her social duty ends at tolerating their presence for a time. Beyond that, they are a burden, one she quietly but thoroughly displaces. And when she justifies this emotional and financial withdrawal, she does so with a kind of chilling logic that masks its selfish core. If you observe, people always live forever when there is an annuity to be paid them. It's dry, almost amusing, but it reveals her worldview. Support is a drain, affection is irrelevant, and generosity is a luxury she has no interest in indulging. In the 95 adaptation, Harriet Walters' Fanny is glorious in her quiet malice. Her voice is clipped and precise, her gaze laced with disdain. She never needs to say anything overtly cruel. The disdain drips from her silences.
Tea.
Walters' performance makes Fanny seem like a woman who holds on to power, not out of malice, but as if it were a birthright. Claire Skinner's version is softer in volume, but sharp with restraint.
So much to do before he arrives. He has a very discerning eye, and I shouldn't want him to find fault with anything.
Her smile rarely reaches her eyes, and her voice often glides just above a whisper, but lands like a slap. She never raises her tone, but she lowers the temperature of a room. Her portrayal of Fanny is quite merciless, and you wouldn't dare challenge her. And yes, in both adaptations, she's crowned with Austen's signature tight curly fringe, an almost symbolic helmet of propriety. Decorative on the surface, but concealing what lies beneath. Let's play devil's advocate for a minute. Could Fanny be acting out of protection? It is possible that she sees herself as defending her son's inheritance.
1,000 apiece, are you mad? Do you rob your only child of his rightful inheritance?
And by extension, her own security. As we know, in Austen's world, it didn't grant women many safeguards, so perhaps Fanny's coldness is a product of survival. She isn't warm, but she is consistent. And yet, the contrast matters. Mrs. Jennings, Sir John, and even Eleanor all give freely. Even when their resources are limited, Fanny withholds despite having plenty. Austen doesn't need to narrate her judgment. She lets the Dashwoods' quiet dignity and Fanny's unmoved comfort speak for themselves. And so we ask ourselves, is Fanny truly heartless, or is she simply the result of society that taught women to guard wealth, status, and position at all costs? If there's one moment in Sense and Sensibility where we truly see Fanny Dashwood's influence crystallise, it's this one. The infamous conversation in which she calmly, elegantly, and almost invisibly persuades her husband not to honour his dying father's final request.
Upon my word, I do believe you're right.
It's not dramatic. There are no raised voices, no passionate outbursts, just a conversation, precise, reasonable, laced with domestic logic, that quietly dismantles the moral promise. And it is without a doubt one of Jane Austen's most brilliant and unsettling pieces of character work. John Dashwood, upon inheriting Norland, is entreated by his father to make provision for his stepmother and half-sisters. The language is vague, and intentionally so, but the emotional weight is clear. The dying Mr. Dashwood assumes his son will do what's right.
You must help them.
Of course.
You must promise to do this.
John believes this too. At first, in fact, he begins with good intentions. He'll give them 3,000, a generous sum. But by the end of his conversation with Fanny, that amount has been reduced to nothing at all. And the idea that he owed them anything has been gently, irrevocably erased. How? With one of Austen's most chilling and quiet techniques, rational conversation. She begins with flattery. Indeed, to say the truth, I am convinced within myself that your father had no idea of your giving them any money at all. She reframes John's generosity as misinterpretation. Then she appeals to domestic responsibilities. Well then, let something be done for them, but not that something need to be £3,000. Consider, she added, that when money is once parted with, it can never return. Suddenly giving becomes losing, a one-way road to regret. And finally, she shifts the weight of responsibility away from John entirely. It would be absolutely unnecessary, if not highly indecorous, to do more for the widow and children of his father than such kind of neighbourly acts as his own wife pointed out. Not only is not helping acceptable, it's now the proper thing to do. Austen doesn't need to condemn Fanny directly. She lets the quiet erosion of John's intention do the work. The language is mild, the tone is gentle, the effect is devastating. Fanny doesn't overpower John. She persuades him by making him feel sensible, shrewd, and even logical. And in doing so, she makes him complicit in his own moral failing. This is Austen showing us that evil doesn't need to be loud. It can come in the form of good manners, pretty homes, and the steady draining of duty into comfort. This scene is sharp and swift in the 95 adaptation. Harriet Walter's portrayal of Fanny barely raises an eyebrow as she cuts through John's good intentions. It's a masterclass in tonal dominance. She never argues, she simply reasons. And John, like a dazed student, nods his way to negligence. In the 2008 version, the scene plays longer and more insidiously.
I meant nothing more than what you said, just a general concern for their welfare, occasional presence of fish and game and so forth.
Exactly.
Claire Skinner's portrayal of Fanny is almost tender in delivery, brushing past the moral responsibility with breathy logic. Mark Gatiss's John starts out hopeful, even noble, and then folds entirely. You see the moment he gives in. It's not a shout, it's swallowed. It's easy to paint John as a victim of persuasion. But let's be honest, Fanny doesn't change his mind. She gives him permission to change it himself. She simply opens the door. He walks through it willingly. That brilliance and danger of Fanny's power. She never needs to force anything. She just makes comfort sound like common sense and generosity sound like folly. What I've often wondered is why doesn't John see the manipulation? It's one of Austen's signature moves. She gives us men like John Dashwood as morally bendable as wet clay, Mr. Collins comically servile, Sir Walter Elliot all ego, no insight, Frank Churchill charming, evasive and avoidant, and Mr. Woodhouse lovable but utterly impractical. Austen doesn't hate men. She simply holds them accountable when they abdicate responsibility under the guise of good breeding or social convenience. She often portrays women as the emotional architects, while men drift, yield, or quietly fail. John Dashwood wants to believe he's good. Fanny gives him the script to do it without cost.
Of course.
He doesn't resist because he trusts Fanny's logic. He likes the comfort it preserves, and perhaps most dangerously, he merges financial frugality with virtue, a very Regency-era kind of justification. How do we measure moral failure when no one raises their voice? When harm is not done by cruelty, but by comfort and convenience? And is Fanny truly to blame? Or is she simply giving voice to what John was hoping to believe all along? If there's one environment that perfectly suits Fanny Dashwood, it's London. Refined drawing rooms, carefully curated conversation, and the invisible scaffolding of social hierarchy. In this setting, her power doesn't need to be spoken aloud. It's built into the very fabric of the room. And when the Dashwood sisters arrive in the city, at the invitation of Mrs. Jennings, not Fanny, the atmosphere shifts. It's not overt. Fanny doesn't scold, protest, or deny them entry, but she makes them feel small without ever appearing inhospitable. This is Fanny's skill. She doesn't create conflict, she creates distance. Fanny occupies a very specific kind of role in Austen's world. The socially dominant woman who withholds approval rather than expresses disapproval. That distinction matters. She never says Eleanor and Marianne shouldn't be in London, but she never truly welcomes them either. When Eleanor visits, she's treated as a formality, present but peripheral. Marianne is treated with polite disregard. Fanny's presence fills the space, but her attention does not. This is Austen's critique of a society that values appearances over connection. Fanny always appears proper, but never once reaches out with kindness. Perhaps the most powerful thing about Fanny in these scenes is how little she says. Austen gives her very little direct dialogue in this portion of the novel, and that's no accident. Fanny doesn't need to speak. She's become symbolic, the embodiment of everything the Dashwood sisters are no longer entitled to. Comfort, status, access. She represents the kind of world that pretends to be open, but keeps its doors firmly closed. This is where the contrast between these two women comes into full force. Mrs. Jennings, loud and lacking polish, invites Eleanor and Marianne into society. She takes them out, introduces them, and celebrates their presence. Fanny, polished and proper, closes every emotional door, all while keeping the front door politely ajar. This is Austen's quiet statement. Refinement without generosity is just performance, and Fanny performs it flawlessly. Have you ever been somewhere where you're technically invited, but made to feel entirely unwelcome? I have, and I must admit I see through those facades nowadays. It's easier to say no. And so Fanny doesn't break social rules. She upholds them so perfectly that they become exclusionary. What does that say to you about Austen's critique of her own class? For all of her restraint, her silence, her precise control, there comes a moment when Fanny Dashwood's carefully composed world ruptures. And the cause is simple: loss of control. Until now, Fanny has managed her social world through unspoken boundaries. But when she receives the news of Edward Ferrars's secret engagement to Lucy Steele, whether it be by Lucy herself,
Of both. But his family would certainly oppose the match. Tush.
as we see in the 95 adaptation, or Anne Steele, as in the 2008 version and the novel.
Oh, I shouldn't have told you that. It's a secret.
What's the secret? I demand that you answer me.
Why, that Lucy and Edward are sweethearts.
Those boundaries are shattered Because this isn't a theoretical inconvenience, this is personal, this is family, and worse, it's a perceived social humiliation. In the novel, Austen doesn't show us the confrontation directly, but she makes it clear that Fanny loses all composure, talking with astonished heat, overwhelming her brother and sending Lucy away only after what's described as violent hysterics. So in the novel we don't see Fanny rage, but we're told it happened, and that's enough. It's the first and only time we're made aware that beneath the surface, Fanny burns. That sounds rude. This moment is important because it tells us something. Austen has been hinting all along. Fanny's control isn't effortless, it's maintained, guarded, constructed, and when it cracks, it isn't dignified, it's explosive. Until now, Fanny has been the enforcer of class and propriety, but Lucy Steele, poor, manipulative, ambitious Lucy, has outmaneuvered her. She's beaten Fanny at her own game, social control through secrecy and strategic positioning. Is this outburst really about Edward, or is it about something else? Is it about status, power, and image? Fanny isn't just upset because her brother is engaged without her approval. Perhaps she's upset because Lucy, in Fanny's mind, is beneath them, and now threatens to become one of them. This is about being outplayed, and for the first time, Fanny has no script. In the 95 adaptation, Harriet Walters is given a moment that Austen never wrote, and it's unforgettably theatrical. She violently reacts to Lucy's news with twitching fury, dramatic gestures, and a voice raised well above her usual clipped restraint. It's comical, but also revealing. It isn't Fanny slipping, this is Fanny unmasked. In the 2008 version, Claire Skinner's portrayal is subtler, but no less effective. While Austen in the novel only allows us to hear about Fanny's furious response second-hand, the adaptation does give her a brief but impactful outburst.
John! John! Please don't be angry with me. John! It ain't my fault.
What is the matter?
It's her!
She raises her voice, calls for John, and is visibly shaken. Her composure slips. It's not theatrical tantrum, but it's still startling. Fanny becomes the woman whose wrath erupts, not in slapstick, but in something quieter, tighter, and more socially devastating. And yes, in both portrayals, her fringe stays immaculate. This moment is one of the few times Fanny faces a true rival. Lucy is everything Fanny fears: socially inferior, manipulative, clever, and successful. Fanny loses control because Lucy succeeds at the game Fanny thought she alone could play. It's not about Edward's happiness. It's not even about marriage. It's about being outwitted, and by someone she deems unworthy. This is where we realize that Fanny's cruelty is never emotionless. It was always emotional, just deeply suppressed. Her anger doesn't come from love. It comes from wounded pride. Why does Fanny lose control here when she's kept it so perfectly elsewhere? Is this her true nature finally showing? Or is this what happens when someone who lives by social rules suddenly finds themselves bested by someone who broke them? After the drama of Edward's disinheritance and Lucy's reveal, one might expect some sort of emotional reckoning, a change, a lesson learned, but for Fanny Dashwood there is no growth, no apology, no transformation, just a quiet return to comfort. She stays in her finely adorned London home. She continues to host, to entertain, to move through the world with the same polished edges and clipped grace. Edward is disinherited. Lucy, remarkably, ends up marrying Robert. The family line is reshuffled. But Fanny, she remains untouched. Jane Austen is often praised for her characters who grow and change. Elizabeth Bennet, Emma Woodhouse, and even Marianne Dashwood all experience some kind of transformation. But Fanny Dashwood is part of a smaller, quieter category whose characters don't change at all, just like Mrs. Jennings in my previous video. And that's no accident. Fanny's stillness isn't about narrative simplicity. It's a kind of commentary. Austen is showing us what happens when someone lives within the system that never challenges them. People like Fanny, socially secure, emotionally guarded, financially comfortable, are not required to evolve, so they don't. They can ignore the pain they cause because the world around them refuses to hold them accountable. Their wealth and manners become a kind of armour, and nothing penetrates. Fanny chooses comfort over conscience every time. She surrounds herself with people who won't push back. She avoids emotional depth because it offers nothing that she wants. And when the emotional dust of every story settles, she resumes her life untouched because she can. Austen's point isn't just that Fanny doesn't change, it's that no one expects her to. The other characters simply work around her. The Dashwoods avoid confrontation. The Ferrers brothers fall into line. And even the Middletons never seek her approval. Her manner becomes a known quantity, one that must be endured, not challenged. Fanny Dashwood, not unlike Lady Catherine de Bourgh, represents these immovable social forces in Austen's world. They are women of status, opinion, and total self-certainty, and crucially, everyone around them simply adapts. In both adaptations, Fanny fades into the background after the engagement drama. She isn't granted a redemptive scene, nor a dramatic downfall. She simply continues, and that in itself is a kind of storytelling choice. In the 95 film, her final appearance is at Marianne's wedding, a surprisingly inclusive scene, if you ask me. Now, whether it's a moment suggesting familial obligation or simply maintaining appearance is left ambiguous, and perhaps that's the point. It was pointed out in the comments section recently that this scene was the first scene filmed in the 95 adaptation, so perhaps Ang Lee hadn't read the story and so included them in the scene. We may never know. In the 2008 version, her final presence is even quieter. No big exit, no speech. She simply disappears from focus as the narrative shifts to reconciliation, love, and emotional restoration. And in doing so, Austen reminds us not everyone is part of the healing. She is in many ways the opposite of what Austen praises. She's not generous. She's not emotionally honest. She is not capable of self-reflection. But she's also not flamboyantly evil, and that's what makes her so real. Have we ever encountered people like her? Polite, well-dressed, always proper, and emotionally indispensable. Her lack of growth is not a narrative failure, it's a narrative choice. Fanny stays the same because the world lets her. What happens to the people who never have to change? Do we judge Fanny because of what she does, or because of how comfortably she never questions it? There's something almost chilling about Fanny Dashwood's presence in Sense and Sensibility. She doesn't storm through the plot like Willoughby or weep like Marianne. She doesn't change. She doesn't collapse. She simply continues, polished, poised, and preserved. And maybe that's what makes her one of Austen's most quietly effective cautionary figures. Fanny represents the kind of person Austen likely saw everywhere in her society, someone who followed all the rules of decorum, but none of the rules of empathy. She knows how to behave, but she never once asks herself if she's behaving well. Her influence is subtle but immense. She silences generosity. She withholds kindness. She gently shapes John Dashwood's conscience until it suits her comfort, and she excludes people from society with a smile on her face and the door still technically open. And she never changes, and perhaps more worryingly, she doesn't need to. And so we leave Fanny Dashwood as we found her, unrepentant, unchanged, and utterly assured of her own correctness. She may not be a villain in the classic sense, but she is a reminder that harm doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from refusal to care. So thank you for joining me in this exploration of a character who says so little but shapes so much. So as always, I'd love to know what you think. Was Fanny simply a product of her society? Was there ever hope of her softening? Or is she, as Austen may have intended, the very embodiment of polite indifference? We used to say that put pen to paper, but I use a word processor so my thoughts flow. And as I type, and in doing so I generally get zoned in to specifics and sometimes miss the bigger picture or miss certain plot points, and that's where your comments become invaluable, and let's face it, enhance the discussions for everyone else. So if you've enjoyed this video, I hope you'll consider joining me for the next chapter in the series as we continue to step through the remarkable ensemble of Sense and Sensibility. So until then, take care, and remember, in Austen's world, kindness isn't always loud, but it's always noticed.